Being able to select properly with CSS is crucial, and this lesson is going to be about advanced selectors. So we've seen a number of ways that we can make selections. We can also select multiple elements using the comma separation. And this time we're going to dive a little bit deeper into how to be more specific with the selection process. So looking at things such as attributes, I've added in a few inputs within our HTML so we can make those selections. There's also the descendant selector. So if we have an element with a class of test1, but we want to select the one that has highlight, so we want to select this first paragraph, then we need to be very specific on our selection process. So let's try that. We've got test1, but we also want to get the descendant, and the descendant has a class of highlight. So we just use the space in order to make that selection, and let's add a background color of yellow, and that actually should be test1. So let's go out and refresh it. So what we're doing here by using the space is that we're making a selection of the parent, and if it's got any elements that are within it that are matching for highlight, they're going to get colored yellow with a background of yellow. So that means as well for if we do have a div inside of here, it's also going to get that. We can also be specific. If we did have a div, then that would also get highlighted. So let's be more specific, and if we want to highlight only the paragraph, we can be specific with the element tag and then also the class that's being applied to it. And that's still looking for the ones that are contained within the parent. So using the space is just a descendant selector. We can also be more specific using a child selector, and the child selector is indicated with the less than sign. So it's going to be looking for any of the children that are matching, that have a parent of test1. So let's refresh, and we still have that same structure where the paragraph highlight has a parent of test1. You're probably wondering, well, what if this isn't the direct parent, and we can move a few things around, and that will change the selection that we need for the element. But if we move this into the div and we refresh, then we're not highlighted anymore because the direct parent is no longer going to be this main top class, that we've moved it into a div. So we have to go a few levels down where we've got a div, and then that one is a direct descendant of the div, which is a direct descendant of test1. So now when we refresh, once again, we're highlighted. So these paths and these selections can get fairly complex. There's also an adjacent sibling selector. So that uses the plus sign, and that will select elements that are immediately after the initial selection element. So let's take another look at that, and we'll select the H2. We'll select the paragraph, and then immediately after, we'll select the paragraph immediately after the one that has a class of big text. So make that selection. So this is a paragraph tag, and it's got a class of big text. I'm just going to double check my spelling. And I'll set the background color to be blue on this. So refresh. So that's turning that one blue. And now let's try to turn the adjacent one blue. So using the plus, we're going to look for the next paragraph and turn that blue. So that turned the next paragraph blue instead of the selected. And I'll just duplicate this big paragraph one so that we can see the difference there. So this is the initial one, and then this is the one that's adjacent to it that we're selecting using the plus sign. Let's also try and do a few more where there's the general sibling selector. So that's indicated with this wavy sign. And that means it's going to look for elements that are preceded. So let's go back into the content, and we'll look at, I'm going to give this one a class of text7. Actually, I'm going to move it up so it's in the middle. So we'll select the element with a class of text7. So paragraph test, is it, or just update this to test 7. So test 7 element class, and do a background for it of green. And we're going to select the elements that are preceding. So those are that are after this one. And this is the wavy line that is done with shift and just above the backtick to the left of the 1 key on most keyboards. And we want to select all of the paragraphs, and I'll turn them pink. So they all have a pink background now. So that turned all of the ones afterwards pink, because it's showing the ones that are preceding. So anything after that. And they have to be siblings to the main one that we selected. There's also specifics you can do with hyperlinks, where if we want to select the hyperlink, we can use the attributes within the input. So let's make a selection, and we're going to update those backgrounds. So we've got an input, and then using the square brackets to indicate the selector, we're going to be looking for the one with a name that is equal to first. And update the background color of it. And I'll set this one to be red. So the first input we've set to be red. We've made the selection using the attribute. And you also don't need the input. You can also just do it like that as well. I usually like to include the inputs, but you don't have to include them, of course. You can also check by other attributes. So if we want to update the element that has a hyperlink to Google, we can select that attribute and select the element, and we'll set the background color of this selection to be aqua color. So that transformed the background of that selected element to aqua. And that selection is going to be looking for elements that have an href attribute that is equal to the website that we've specified, and that's the Google. So it has to match exactly in order for it to be able to pick that element up. And of course, we can also comma separate out the elements. So selecting the test 1, I believe we have a few that are test. So test 2, test 3, and let's apply a color to all of these. Set them to a green yellow. So you can comma separate out and make multiple selections of different elements. So also when you are designing your HTML, make sure that if there are elements that you need particular design and color and different styling properties applied, that you can select them properly and fairly easily using the CSS selection.